As we look at some of this video, we can tell you that we have two guests here to discuss the situation in depth. Lisa Ruth joins us in studio. She's the former CIA analyst, current analyst from LIGNET. You can see her work at lignet.com. And via telephone, Dr. Walid Phares, Middle East expert, author of The Lost Spring, U.S. Policy in the Middle East and Catastrophes to Avoid. Lisa in studio and Walid on the phone, we thank you very much. And Dr. Phares, first to you, because I think at times people get, we hear certain expressions and we assume everyone knows about certain holidays. Could you explain for our viewers who may not fully understand Ramadan, what does that mean on the Islamic calendar?
Well, to make the story very short, Ramadan is actually the most important holiday of the Islamic calendar. It is when the fasting begins, and at the end of which there is the greatest celebration. And Muslims are supposed to fast from morning till late afternoon. They are allowed to eat and drink after that. It is a reflection of old traditions of sacrifice and purity for the soul.
And with that in mind and the fasting aspect, Lisa, as we take a look at this, there has been a feeling that during Ramadan, military action would decrease, but some acts of terror would increase. Does that correspond to what we've seen with our involvement in Iraq over the past few years?
Well, certainly historically, as Dr. Phares says, what happens is you're dealing with at least the ultra-conservatives fasting. That tends to make the fighting on the ground that we've seen less. So simply don't have the stamina, the physical ability to do so. However, we do see an increase in things like terrorist attacks, specifically at mosques. You have large congregations of people. It makes a very large splash, if you will, to attack mosques during Ramadan, and we tend to see that happen during this period.
And with that in mind, what may happen in the mosque, Walid reports coming to us this morning out of Egypt saying that the government there is asking mosques to restrict their sermons during Ramadan, concentrating simply on topics of faith and morality. And you see this here, Mohammed Mokhtar Goma, the Minister of Religious Endowments, quote, "The religious speech was politically driven, which affected the moral side. Now we're in a race against time, trying to restore morals." With the change in government in Egypt, do you think this effort to control the sermons for Ramadan will be successful?
Well, what has happened in the past is under the Mubarak regime, the Muslim Brotherhood used mosques to gather, to recruit, to indoctrinate, to spread a more radical message. The government allowed them and told them you can't work inside the mosque but not outside the mosque, just to create a balance. Under Morsi regime, for a brief time, 1 year, the mosque controlled by the Muslim Brotherhood became the actual mobilizing machine for the Muslim Brotherhood, creating tens of thousands of militants. Under Sisi now, there is a reversal. The government is trying to de-radicalize the mosque. They have with them Al-Azhar, which is the most important spiritual center of the Sunni world. That would be the Vatican of the Sunni world, helping the government to make sure that the clerics inside the mosque will spread only a message that is strictly religious, has nothing to do with politics or with government or most importantly with jihad. It is going to be difficult because the Brotherhood are well spread inside Egypt, but I think this is a new direction that we're going to see more of in Egypt.
Lisa, as Walid mentions the fact that during the Mubarak regime, the strongman overthrown, there was at least more consistency in the policy, or at least that's what I gleaned from the good doctor's comments. Now with the change in government and the military takeover, for all intents and purposes, how successful do you think they'll be against the remnants of the Muslim Brotherhood and what is going on in some of these mosques?
Well, we spoke last week about this. My real concern with pushing the Muslim Brotherhood underground is that you're going to actually see increased terrorism. And we've seen this in the last week. Actually, we had bombings in the subways. We had a bombing on Friday of I think a bomb accidentally exploded in a telephone area. I don't think that al-Sisi, he brings fear certainly to the Muslim Brotherhood, but I don't think he has the ability to impact the message the same way. They're not working together.
So with this in mind, Walid, does this in a weird way set up the renaissance of the Muslim Brotherhood as they become, I guess, the Egyptian underground in essence?
Well, they have always been in the underground from 1926 till they came to power, up and down, and sometimes they cut deals with the. They are very savvy, sophisticated movement, large in numbers, 600,000. But one thing has changed, which was not there before. Not just about Sisi or his government or the previous regime or the intelligence services. It's about millions of Egyptians who chose against the Brotherhood. See what happened on June the 30th, that would be exactly last year, was a demonstration of 33 million Egyptians of all walks of life against the Brotherhood. They did not basically choose Sisi first. They chose to remove the Brotherhood, and then Sisi joined them, and then there were elections. So I think that the real Arab Spring in Egypt happened a year ago. Now, of course, the government will have to be smart, intelligent, sophisticated, and include those elements that are moderates among the Islamists. That's where the challenge is going to be in the process of politics. But the people has not accepted anymore the rules of the Muslim Brotherhood and their allies.
Lisa, in your mind, the military element of this new government, will it be perceptive enough to be inclusive to a point?
So far, we have not seen that. However, not to underestimate what's going on, I think it's still playing out. So far, what we've seen is death sentences against Muslim Brotherhood members, really pretty strongly clamping down. But if the lessons in Iraq are going to be translated anywhere, you would think that people would start looking around and saying, wow, we can't afford to do this. I don't underestimate Sisi. I do think that there are still radical elements that oppose Sisi and support the Brotherhood. And the question is going to be how he can rein those in.
From the world of social media and the politically correct, Katie Hopkins, a TV star and tabloid columnist from London, created a buzz with some tweets on the subject saying, quote, Ramadan typically brings a spike in violence in the Middle East. I get grumpy when I don't eat, but I don't blow things up. Religion of peace. The reaction? She was called ignorant for those comments. Lisa, as we take a look at the United Kingdom, and some have freely called London Londonistan, is this a one-way ticket to real problems for someone like Katie Hopkins?
I think obviously social media gets a little bit flippant, perhaps, but there's no question that there is a spike in violence. I think looking at why, it's partially about the attention. Again, you have large congregations of people in a mosque. If I was Katie, I'd be very careful.
Well, with 2.5 minutes remaining, I'd like your input on this question. We're going back to Iraq, and we're hearing reports that now the Russians are sending military assistance to Iraq, I believe specifically some sort of aircraft. Walid, from your vantage point, the rise of the bear, at least arming folks in Iraq, what's your take on that?
My take is that we have been 5 years late in the process in Iraq. We can continue to debate how we entered Iraq as a state, but we can also debate how we exited Iraq. We left it in the hands of two forces. In the south and the center, the Maliki government, which is pro-Iranian, and they have been increasing the influence of the Iranians, so the Iranians have a say in it. In the center, the Sunni triangle, we abandoned our Sunni moderate friends, and now we have Daesh, which in fact is a neo-Al-Qaeda. These are the new jihadists in control of 1/3 of Iraq. So now the Russians are going to send planes or not, we are going to be having a limited intervention or not. I think the play is going to be between the jihadi Sunnis and al-Maliki pro-Iranian government for not just for days and weeks, it's going to be for years, unfortunately.
Lisa, your assessment of the situation now that the Russians are arming the Iraqis?
Sure. The Russians are sending in Su-25s, which provide air support for ground operations. On the other hand, we are sending Hellfires, about 3 weeks worth. We know that in February there was leaks that Iran was providing military equipment. As the doctor said, we are a little bit too late here, but in terms of playing it out, I also think there may be a little bit more going on with the U.S. than we're aware of. We are flying drones now. If you look at the Tikrit situation, it does appear that the U.S. has provided some support. So this is going to be playing out in an international arena, and who's going to get the support there and who's going to win Maliki's backing.
We will keep an eye on it, Lisa, with your work at LIGNET.com. And of course, Walid, your book, The Lost Spring, U.S. Policy in the Middle East and Catastrophes to Avoid. Oh, that we could avoid some of the difficulties right now. To you both, we thank you for your time and your insights. And now it's time to call on you, your take on what you're hearing. You can use social media. I don't know if you want to use it like Katie Hopkins did, but you can tweet us at NewsmaxTV, hashtag America's Forum. There's also email and Facebook, and you'll see our faces again following the break.